Fantasy Sports Podcast, and it should be a good one. Another college football player profile, and another stellar athlete, another stellar veteran athlete. But this time, it's a different story and trajectory to tell than Jackson Dart's. This young man was a journeyman for many years. Started off at the FCS level at Incarnate Word, became one of their best players of all time, led them in passing yards. Transferred to Washington State, where he really made a name for himself as a Pac-12 player, and really got Washington State to a level that they didn't expect back into the national spotlight. Unfortunately, they did not follow their comrades to the Big Ten, and they sit in a weird position. And now their quarterback is one of the biggest national names in college sports. I'm, of course, talking about the great Cam Ward. And we talk about college football athletes. And we talk about how the landscape of transferring and staying in college, most importantly, has changed. It's very interesting to see someone with Cam Ward's story still in college football. But I feel like in terms of real life and fantasy, we have to cherish a player like Cam Ward, because with that experience breeds production unlike many others. In fact, I only believe that Dylan Gabriel has more passing yards in the span that both of them were in college than Cam Ward. And that's saying something about him. Now he goes to a Miami team that really believes that they can compete right now. It's with a swing for the fences transfer. And if this doesn't work out, I feel like Miami will be set back many, many years in terms of where they are. They have what they believe is the receiving core to take them to the promised land. The ACC is a little bit chaotic. Florida State and Clemson might want to leave in a couple years, so that might open up the ACC a little bit more. But this year is very pivotal because they believed in Cam Ward, and Cam Ward believed in them enough to forego the NFL draft. That's another big part of his story, another big part of the story of what this means to Miami. A lot is at stake for this team. So let's talk about Cam Ward. Last season is last at the University of Washington State. 3,732 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. His best game was against Northern Colorado. Obviously, he's not going to be playing Northern Colorado every single week in the ACC. He's going to be playing some tough opposition. But he did have 20 for 26, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. His worst, ironically, was against a guy we talked about before, Noah Fafita in Arizona. 5.1 points, 22 of 30 passing, 192 yards, and 1 INT. And so, the funny thing about Cam Ward is that when you talk about a player who started at the FCS level, and you talk about him progressing all the way to Miami, and now you're placing so much trust in him, it feels a little bit weird to truly call him someone who might be inexperienced in this setting, because Miami's always going to be talked about in the national scene. And at Washington State even, no one was talking about them outside of perhaps their decision to try and stay in the Pac-12 and not go to the Big Ten. And so, what this means for his career, for going in the NFL draft and going to Miami, is also very weird to consider as well. Because I think that Cam Ward would have looked more appealing in this year's draft as a late round pick than he will in next year's draft. Because last year's draft was a very top-heavy class in terms of, Caleb Williams and players of that nature. But there really was a huge fall-off after that, so I think picking up Cam Ward there. But it also gives us an opportunity to cherish Cam Ward's final college football season. And what we cherish about Cam Ward is that wherever he has gone, he has always been someone who not only elevates the team, but doesn't make it about himself. I think that's what Miami needed. And I think that's why they chose to go for Cam Ward as someone who can set the record straight and say, hey, we don't deserve to be in the national spotlight right now. We are actually awful. And we have an opportunity to now build and become something better. I think that Cam Ward takes Miami down a peg in terms of bragging rights. I think he offers them a sense of humility in terms of where they stand right now. But, like I said before him, he actually has the weapons around him to truly make Miami a threat, not just in the ACC, but potentially as a CFP contender. Xavier Restrepo, one of the better wide receiver ones last year and will be this year, over 1,000 yards and 6 TDs for him. That's not a terrible stat to have. Jacoby George, I really love him and his catch radius, his footwork, his tremendous ability to make contested catches. 864 yards. And Sam Brown, a Houston transfer, adds some electricity vertically as well. And what I love about Cam Ward is that he's going to respect that. He's going to respect that a lot of players on this team do have the profile of high-end players, do have the profile of a team that deserves to be in the CFP. And he's going to work with that. And so, when I think of the landscape that Cam Ward has gone through, I think it'd be highly appreciative if Miami really coalesces around his message, really coalesces around him as a figure. Because at the end of the day, if you want to beat the duopoly of Florida State and Clemson, you have to represent the humility that they have. Because Florida State last year might have been the paramount example of a team with humility. They just took everything in stride, and heartbreak happened for them, and they really kind of, deserved better. And then with Clemson, when they were successful, yes, there was a lot of attention around guys like Trevor Lawrence, guys like Deshaun Watson, but Dabo Swinney really tied that group together and made them realize, hey guys, we can't get in over our heads. Until we beat the best, we are not the best. And that's what I think Cam Ward represents for Miami, because Miami just tries to do too much. They're always, trying to get their boosters. You always hear these stories about Miami. But until they beat people, until they prove their point, they can be sticking around in this ACC for as long as Florida State and Clemson are here with them, then Miami can be realized and they'll have bragging rights again. And Cam Ward, in this process, might just be a stepping stool. Because remember, this is his 5th year playing the game of college football. So he's obviously going to go to the NFL after this. But in order for this season to really mean something to him in Miami, there has to be a cultural approach that borders on humility. The one caveat I have with Cam Ward going to Miami is his own success. Because I really like what he did for kind of the small school mentality. Coming from Incarnate Word, making his bones there, going to Washington State, not necessarily the highest profile Power 5 program, having fantastic season after season there, now transferring to a culture that doesn't necessarily speak to who he is. And so, if Cam Ward gets lost in that, I think he loses a lot of value. Not just as a fantasy player this season, But say he is a tie-end quarterback this season, but Miami fails to meet expectations, how that speaks to his draft status and how it speaks to future years when we talk about him as a fantasy football player in the NFL. I don't necessarily want to say that this decision ruined Cam Ward's reputation immediately. Well, that would be way too rash, because I still do love him as a fantasy prospect and as a real-life player for Miami. But it does say something that Cam Ward wants to go to Miami in such a pivotal time. Because it could either mean that this is the back end of his college career and he just wants to enjoy his time, or this means he takes the job and role of Miami QB seriously. And I hope for Miami's sake that it's the latter, because if it's the former, then you're going to be stuck in a cycle for years to come of trying to get out of this mindset of we're not the best anymore, and we have to realize that before it's too late. And so that's the thing. There's a fine line between having fun in your final season of college football and actually competing. And Cam Ward has proven that the latter is always in play and will always be what matters to him. But it's Miami, man. You're going to be caught up in the allure of it at some point. When you play for Miami, you're caught up in that mindset. You're caught up in the expectations of it. And it's up to you to kind of realize that you're not bigger than anyone but yourself. And you have to play within that structure. You have to accept the fact that not everything's going to be coming up aces. And so I love Cam Ward, and I love what he means for the season of college football. But he's got to be careful with how he does it. But that will just about do it for this show. Thank you guys for tuning in. I've been Chris Shepard on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. Leave a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud. Leave a super chat or super thanks in the comments on YouTube, and they will be answered and addressed in the next episode, as well as any questions, comments, or concerns left at gsmc.cloud. I will be back tomorrow for the last show of the week. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in.